When a new mysterious string of serial killings end up having deep dark ties to the life of Steve Rogers, it'll be up to Captain America to unravel this web of death before the killer can strike again. What'll happen next? We'll hop to the pages of Captain America issue number 3 and find out together, shall we? So then, as we join the book, we're treated to an internal monologue from Steve that goes into great detail about the rather unique way in which he perceives time. And I mean, yeah, if you're born in one era and defrosted in another, it is probably gonna mess with your perception. As far as Cap is concerned, there's really only a here and now. And more often than not, he finds his memories and life experiences crashing into each other. Essentially, this is just a really clever way to set up this issue's fun gimmick. But more on that in a minute. Captain America is summoned by Misty Knight, agent of the Aberrant Crimes Division, and oh man, do I love it when they actually bring up this group and the fact that Misty works for them. Feels like they were always meant to be an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. replacement, and then they just kind of weren't. Misty, as we discover, has stumbled upon a series of grisly murders committed all over the world. The main hallmarks being the victims' bodies scorched to the point where their bones turned into ashes and the walls inside the crime scene covered in these strange markings. And as Steve and Misty try and examine the crime scene, the book actually steps back in the very same frame wherein we get to see the serial killer from the last issue, who has since taken up a costume and a code name, the Emissary, which doesn't exactly sound all that intimidating, but I don't think the name was actually his idea. The Emissary's newest victim was an anti-war advocate. A nice guy with no enemies. In fact, everyone he's killed so far basically has the very same MO, and that's because they're all the agents of change we learned about in the previous issue. As far as those markings on the wall go, they're the dark algorithm, aims on a holy union between high-tech science and evil arcane magics. What does that actually mean in context? Well, basically when the Emissary kills someone who was destined to go on and do some good things for the world, he not only destroys their bodies, but steals their very souls. There's a very fun and funny aside wherein Misty Knight uses a Doctor Strange figurine so the Doctor can astral project there and give his magical opinion. It's by doing this, Steve is able to discover that amongst all the markings on the dark algorithm, there is a very familiar one, a star in a circle, implying that Cap is most certainly the Emissary's next victim. It's after that we end up flashing back into time once again. Once again, we see young Steve Rogers with cojones the size of grapefruits heckling American Nazis during one of their rallies. This time, Steve actually manages to annoy the MC so much they actually give him the floor for a second. The future Captain America rips apart these guys' ideology in just a few seconds by using, get this, swords as an allegory. Steve says that people like the German American bun want their country to be just one thing, like an iron sword, something that is ultimately quite brittle, unlike a steel sword, which is made of many more components and as such is much stronger. It may bend, but it might never break. Obviously, the Nazis hate having people poke holes in their ideas, and as such they end up running him out and throwing a bunch of garbage at him, while also yelling that he must be some sort of Bolshevik plant. Well, geez, you know, some things never change. It's on his way out, though, Steve ends up getting accosted by, and I cannot believe I am about to say these words, Meyer freaking Lansky. Lansky, in case you don't know, and I get the feeling there's probably a lot of young people out there who don't, was a very real mobster who lived back in those times, and he was probably the most powerful Jewish criminal who ever lived. In fact, if it wasn't for him and his cohorts, there probably wouldn't even be a Las Vegas. Lansky has been watching Steve speak truth to these Nazis, and he's really quite impressed. He also thinks that he might be out of his mind, and as such he's invited him back to his office so that he can get a better feel of him. As Steve so eloquently puts it, it doesn't matter what these guys call themselves, Nazis, SS, stormtroopers, fascists, or whatever names they might think up for themselves in the future. At the end of the day, they're just bullies and cowards, people who need to wear uniforms so they feel like they belong, who need to wear armbands so they think they're tough. And if you roll over for them now, you're going to be rolling over for them the rest of your life. Lansky couldn't agree more. In fact, he's been going out of his way to use his underworld muscle to try and undermine the German-American Bund, hijacking their trucks and roughing up their members, but unfortunately there's only so much he can do. A, because, well, he's a little too famous and anytime he shows up he's going to make a scene, and B, because he's still in league with the Italian mob right now who are having their own difficulties at the moment thanks to Mussolini. But Steve, though, he's fearless, he's driven, driven, but best of all, he doesn't actually draw too much attention to himself. It's because of that Lansky gives him the mother of all leads, something the German-American Bund are calling Operation Stadium, and if you read the last issue, you know full well that they plan to blow up New York's biggest sports arena in a false flag attempt that they hope will have regular everyday American Joes like Steve flocking to their side, in hopes of trying to regain their lost strength and honor. You know, I'm sure there's already some people out there flipping their wigs at the idea that Steve would ever even just mildly team up with a famous mobster like Meyer Lansky, but to those people I say, you should look into the actually fairly complicated history of all the things that the mob actually did do during that time to help the Allies win the Second World War. You will be surprised. It's after this flashback the book once again contorts itself in time, only it's here we learn the origins of the emissary. It seems that Travis Lane, the new owner of AIM Island, was planning to give his brand new serial killer flunky a battle suit that would harden his abilities as well as further strengthen him with gamma radiation and magic. Only it would seem in doing so he made the emissary a far too promising potential new host body for Asmodee, the demon force who's actually been running things. Also, as it turns out, Asmodee actually has a very long and deep-seated history with Cap himself. He says that once before Asmodee had worked through humans, only to have Captain America stop him, and again, you probably don't need to be a genius to riddle out that he's probably talking about World War II and the Nazis. Now, as the comic comes to a close, Steve leaves the crime scene to go look for the emissary, only he doesn't have to look far because the guy's actually been waiting outside for him this whole time. And as the comic comes to a close, the two end up climactically leaping towards one another, and so that was Captain America issue number 3, everybody, and I gotta say, this year is almost over, but J. Michael Straczynski is making a real strong play for one of the best new books of the year. In fact, this is probably my favorite issue of this series so far. I absolutely love the creative, inventive ways it makes use of time, telling a sort of story that you could really only do in the comic book format. I'm also really loving how J. Michael Straczynski is weaving real history here with comic book action and characters. When I picked up this book this week, I really was not expecting Steve Rogers chops it up with Meyer Lansky, but hey, here we are. Also, while at first I thought Travis Lane and Asmodee were pretty generic as far as villains go, I'm actually starting to come around to the demon in this one, mainly because he kicked Travis to the curb and possessed someone a little bit more interesting. Overall, I think I would feel very confident giving this one a much deserved 9 out of 10. Honestly, this is my favorite type of series to make a video about. Sometimes I struggle to find enough to talk about in one single issue, but here in Captain America, I struggle to think about what stuff I'm gonna have to cut for time. Hey there everyone, it's your old pal Cape Joel again, thanking you so much for watching to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, why not check out my Amazon link down in the description. Yes, that's right, the Cape Joel channel officially has its own Amazon storefront now. You can pick up a comic or anything else for that matter, and if you did, you'd really be helping me in the channel. So with that out of the way everyone, I will see you again next time. Bye-bye.